a lot of students will go through high school, and if you're averse to asking questions, if you're that student who's a bit stuck in class, you don't quite understand a concept in English or in math, and you just leave that class, you don't ask a question, you just think I'll figure it out later, versus the student who proactively says, hey, actually, I want to get the answer to this question. I want to ask for advice, and I'm okay appearing that, I don't know what I'm doing here. That different mindset is critical, because if you compound just asking that one question a day over the course of 4 years of high school, the amount of extra information you soak in is far higher. And so I think that willingness to proactively ask for advice and bring in experts around you is a critical skill. And furthermore, people are usually really happy to help. People love to share wisdom and expertise. And so it's very rare that you ask someone for help who's, older than you with a bit more wisdom than you, and they say no. Hardly ever happens. So it's more of that mental barrier within the student or the entrepreneur. It's a very powerful trait. Guidance counselors, other folks in the school who might be just in the pattern of recommending local colleges and universities, and obviously these really competitive schools like Stanford and Chicago, they've got very extensive application processes, so it's a very big lift for everyone involved to send kids to these schools. And so I think in general there's a tendency to deviate to more conservative options and take the path that's a bit easier, but that's really a huge loss of opportunity. So it's really critical that students are applying to the most ambitious schools possible for them. And the good thing about this process is that it is a holistic admissions process in which students are assessed based on the context of their high school. So if they go to a high school where a kid hasn't gone to, say, Yale in 4 years or something, or the school only has a couple of AP subjects you can take, or there aren't that many extracurriculars on offer actually, and you've got a student who's actually really thrive within that environment, they'll actually get a lot more support from the admissions office. A lot of the time, the way these things mount is quite exponential. You may have, say, 3 different bad things that have happened, and they feel overwhelming at the moment. But if you slow down and just talk through them one by one and realize actually you can, hopefully at least mitigate maybe 2 of these things, that can really bring down the pressure quite significantly. The other thing from a practical high school perspective, to make this very concrete, is you can actually smooth many of the challenging milestones of high school over 4 years rather than just 1 year. So things like the SAT, things like your college essays, things like extracurriculars, you can actually bring them forward and do them, in the early couple of years of high school. So there's less of this kind of big pressure near the end when everything is due at the same time. And so techniques like that in many areas of life where you just aren't allowing yourself to get to a point where there's just too many intense things happening at one time is a great technique. People really underestimate how quickly you can pivot your trajectory or build some new skills that can meaningfully change, the pace of your career. So I see a lot of folks that are, in the mold or in the funk of a certain kind of job. They've got a certain skill set. That's what they're applying. They're not pursuing any kind of studying outside of their, career. They think that's a bit difficult. And so they're really just going through the motions in one particular role. It could start with a Coursera class where you learn, some basic statistics tools or some financial analytics skills you haven't learned before. Or it could be a negotiating class online that helps you, manage conflict in your job more effectively. And then secondly, often it can take only 6 months to 3 years to pivot to a new type of role, but you need to ask. So you need to either speak to your employer, figure out what other parts of the organization could be really interesting to you and how you can get there. But I think you need to switch from being sort of like a passive recipient of working dynamics to being a very active learner.
If you enjoy this podcast, please make sure to subscribe. To stay updated on everything that the Action Catalyst is up to, make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Action Catalyst Podcast and Twitter at Catalyst_Action. Thanks for listening.